My name is Savannah Martin. I'm a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians in Oregon, and I am a biological anthropology PhD student at WashU. My research, what I would like to be doing with most of my time, is focused on the very real biological consequences of psychosocial stress. So I study how discrimination and racism and stressors related to cultural identity can actually lead to metabolic dysregulation in the body, and how racism can quite literally make you sick. A lot of people are not aware that Native Americans actually suffer the highest rates of obesity and diabetes and cardiovascular disease, and even police violence of any ethnic or racial minority in all of the United States. And it has a lot to do with the fact that colonialism was a very successful enterprise here. But there are a lot of problems and issues that aren't getting attention, that need attention in Native American communities, and so that's why I was really interested in it. The concept of historical trauma from decades ago, from past generations, influencing the health of current generations, is an idea that Indigenous peoples have understood for a while. But Western science hasn't bothered to learn the language to understand that they're both having the same conversation. Until it became named epigenetics, the idea that psychological stress could make a permanent mark on your biology was dismissed out of hand as kind of ridiculous, while Indigenous peoples have always understood the really tight interconnectedness of mind and body when it comes to your health. When we think about diversity, we think about, Black, white, Asian, Latino, Native American, if people remember to say Native American, because we're often forgotten. That's what a lot of people conceptualize as diversity. I think that's kind of where my work comes in, I'm not talking about diversity between different ethnic or racial categories. I'm talking about diversity within them. And I guess also how the diversity of experiences influences diversity of health outcomes and diversity in so many other venues than just what do you look like and what's your ancestry. I think I share this experience with many other marginalized scholars, in that we are ostensibly welcomed and invited in and brought into all these different venues because we have diverse perspectives and therefore we have so much to contribute. But then what ends up happening is that becomes our only identifier or our only value in the eyes of a lot of people. And so my experience being an Indigenous woman in the academy has been that my identity as an Indigenous woman is the only thing I am allowed to be around a lot of people. The problem is that with marginalized scholars, we're often the only ones at our institutions, and in order to interact with other individuals who are like us, we have to go to conferences. That's expensive. As a PhD student, if you're lucky enough to be funded, even if you have a generous stipend, it's incredibly difficult to afford going to more than 1 or 2 conferences a year. And I think what departments can do is ensure that they set aside extra funding specifically allocated to supporting diverse students so that they can go make these important community and mentorship connections at conferences. The other ways that departments can walk the walk is to be really reflexive about what they're doing, what individuals within the department are doing, to perhaps burden these students, to recognize the extra labor that they're placing on them. If departments can be a little bit more reflexive about the ways they might alienate or otherwise make students feel unwelcome and start to address that in very real ways, I think that would really help to support these students and make sure they make it out, to make sure they're successful. Indigenous scholars and marginalized scholars have to do so much mental calculus before they say or do anything. That is a huge burden on so many other scholars that I've spoken to. When and if someone says something like circle the wagons in a journal club meeting, for example, the decision whether or not you can say something about that, whether or not you can call them out in that public setting, There is all kinds of calculus that goes into exactly which words to say, if you even come to the decision that you're going to say something, when to say something, if it'll harm you, if you'll come off like the angry Native woman, if you're gonna create ill feelings between yourself and somebody who might eventually have power over whether or not you get hired somewhere. These are all considerations that marginalized scholars have to make every time they confront any sort of ignorance around diversity. And that is a huge, just mental burden. That's just the beginning of the type of work and labor that we are expected to perform on top of our labor as scientists and as scholars. That's something that I wish people were really aware of. If you're not a marginalized scholar, if you have that privilege not to have to consider with and deal with these things, and you witness something, if someone uses an antiquated term that's kind of racist, say something. Don't leave it up to them to say something about it. You can educate. If you're not educated on the topic, go educate yourself, and then speak up and point out that it's not okay for people to be using outdated racist terms or saying jokes like "that's my spirit animal." Please, just for the love of God, people stop saying that, by the way. Speak up and say something so that I don't have to, because I have better things to do, like my science. If other people would just step in occasionally and help with this, then I could get on with doing my research in biomarkers. Is there anything else you want people to know? At these meetings, stop staring at my face while you walk by. If you want to know about my tattoo, come ask me about it politely. I would be glad to talk to you about it.